Excuse me. Good morning. This is the 18th of June, 2010. I'm Dr. Jack Herlin, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum in Southern California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. As part of the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in those conflicts. Today I'm here at the museum with a special guest, Mrs. Glennis Cox, excuse me, and I have the honor and the privilege of interviewing this morning Major Robert Cox. Major Cox was a Marine flyer during World War II in the South Pacific from 1942 to 1946. He's the holder of many citations and awards. So we're going to talk to him about this and a lot of other things too. It's very nice to have you here, sir. We appreciate your interest and your service to the nation.
Privilege.
Now, if you were spell and state your full name, please, sir. Your your full name.
Robert J. Cox.
And could you spell it for me, please?
Robert J. Cox.
And where were you born, Major Cox?
I was born in Oklahoma, but I got smart when I was 6 weeks old and moved to California.
And what year were you born, sir?
1921.
Excellent. What was the name of your father?
Robert B. Cox. Robert Barclay.
And where was he born?
He was born in Kansas.
Where did his family come from?
Haviland, Kansas.
And what about even back before that? Did they immigrate from someplace?
Well, there were 3 Cox brothers that came over from England at about the same time. And my grandfather was one of the 3.
One of the 3.
There were
So
quite a few Coxes.
English and Irish
Right,
in there. That's a good for a warrior.
you bet.
And your mother's name, sir?
Opal Ione Cox.
And
Her maiden name was Walker.
Walker. And the derivation of her, where was she born?
She was also born in Oklahoma.
Okay. Her family derived from
The Walkers,
probably the same place,
yeah, about the
very
same
likely.
place.
And how long had they been married?
Oh my. They died several years ago,
Uh-huh.
but they'd been married, what,
Oh, probably 60 years. I don't remember.
A long time.
yeah.
What business did your father do?
He was a foreman for Portland General Electric Company. He built power lines in
And that's after you moved to
Oregon.
Oregon. And you said you left California. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I had 2 brothers and 1 sister.
And your brothers, are they living now, sir?
They've predeceased me.
All of them.
No, my sister's still alive.
And what?
She's the baby. And they live in Beaverton, Oregon.
All right. And where did your mother and father meet, by the way? Do you have any idea?
Oh yeah, they met in Haviland, Kansas at a Quaker Academy.
Oh, really? And they were students there?
Yes.
And they got married. That's interesting. And your grandparents, did you know your grandparents at all?
Yes, I knew both of my grandparents. My mother's father, Reverend Walker, was a minister, and I knew him well. And we lived on the same farm with them in
Is that right?
Newburgh, Oregon for several years.
And he was a minister in what denomination, what church?
Well, when he was in Kansas, he was a Quaker, and then he moved out west, and the Quakers were too modern for him, so he joined the Free Methodist Church.
Good. Okay, excellent. And is that where you grew up?
Yes, in Oregon.
In Oregon. And you moved when you were 6 weeks or months?
Yeah, well, we actually moved to California, and then my dad went to work for the Red Line,
Yeah.
and he was a conductor, and he didn't like that, so he became a motorman, and he liked that.
In Los Angeles?
Yes.
Mhm.
And then when Grandpa and Grandma moved to Oregon, my parents moved with them.
Along with you and your siblings. And where in Oregon did they move to?
They moved initially to Newburgh, Oregon, and we lived there. I attended grammar school in Newburgh.
I was going to just ask you that. You went to grammar school
Right.
all through all the grades?
Just the grades. Then when I was in junior high school, we moved to Sheridan,
Oregon.
Oregon.
Okay. Let me ask you this one in grammar school. What were your activities? Did you enjoy sports? What did you do? How did you play with the neighbors?
I always enjoyed sports. I played football, and I also enjoyed debate and forensics and speech activities.
Good. Were you a good student?
Yes, I was.
And then you did. Who was your best friend in grammar school? We're really digging here, aren't we?
Yeah, in grammar school. Well, I went to grammar school 2 years in Kansas, and then
Okay.
back out to Oregon. We
Oh.
moved back to Kansas, and Dad,
Oh,
he thought he wanted to be a farmer again, and
okay.
it didn't work out too well, so,
Those were tough days, weren't they?
right. So he moved back to Oregon and started over again with the power company.
Mhm.
And he worked with them then until he retired.
Is that right? So then, where did you go to high school?
I went to high school in Sheridan High School
And Sheridan High School in what city?
in Sheridan.
In Sheridan, I
Sheridan's
see.
a small town in Oregon.
Where exactly is it located for those of us who don't know?
Well,
Where's Sheridan?
McMinnville is a large town, and we were just 12 miles west of McMinnville.
What kind of a neighborhood was it that you lived in? Was it a residential area?
Yes, it was residential rural.
Mm-hmm.
We had, we lived in several different places, and the place that Dad bought was 5 acres on the river. And he always had horses. Loved them and broke them. Horses that nobody else could ride. He
Is
could
that
ride.
right? Did he have any rodeo experience
Yes, he did when he was young
in Kansas,
in Kansas.
Oklahoma?
No, in Kansas, actually.
Interesting. And how about you? Did you have your horse?
Yeah, we always had a horse as long as I was at home, but our horse days ended when I went to college.
Okay. Yeah. Well, how big a spread did you have then in Sheridan?
What kind of experience?
How large a place? Did you have a place where you had acres? Was it a farm?
Yeah, it was a small farm. We had 3 acres.
And what did your father try to grow while he was working?
Well, mostly horses,
Hmm.
but he worked for the power company.
Did you have a special breed of horse?
Quarter horses.
Mm-hmm. Did you how did you get to school, to high school?
High school, I rode my bike,
So you're close.
yeah. In grammar school in Kansas, we rode a horse. We, my kid brother and I.
Mm-hmm. In high school, did you play sports as well?
I played football,
What position?
and I was a halfback, running back. I liked that.
Did you? How many years did you play?
I played on the frost team, and then I played 3 years on the varsity.
Excellent. Do you have any special girlfriends in high school?
Yeah. I married one of them.
Did you really? All right. And
She was a farmer's daughter,
and what was her name?
Georgia Brandt Cox.
Her maiden name was Brandt.
Yeah. Not this one.
No. That's interesting. What was your favorite subject in high school?
Probably because of my teacher, it was physics. Because I had a fantastic physics prof. And, so because of him, that was my favorite subject.
Is that right? That's unusual, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was your longing? What were you thinking in terms of doing for the future while you were in high school? Did you have any idea?
Yeah, I think I wanted to be a minister.
And
And I took all the speech courses I could.
great.
And also took Latin and courses that I thought would assist me in that profession.
Of course. And so by the time you graduated from high school, you were 18,
Yeah.
and you had lived through the last part of the Depression. Was it Depression a problem for your parents?
Well, I never knew there was a depression until it was all over with, because my dad shielded us from it. But when he came back to Oregon, the power company said that his job would be waiting for him, but depression was on and they couldn't use him. So for 2 years, he shook walnuts out of the walnut trees, and he was just a little guy.
Yeah.
But he always had big man jobs, and he did, grunt work.
Sure, whatever he could.
Right. And then when the Depression was over, he went back with the power company.
When was the first time you saw an airplane? Do you remember?
Yeah. It flew over our little farm and landed in a wheat field, and I went up in it.
Did you know the pilot?
No.
Tell us about
Dad, Dad knew him, but I didn't.
Tell us about it.
Okay.
get to that. I'll show you that in a minute.
That's a B-25 with a 75 millimeter cannon.
I'll get to that.
Okay.
We got it. We're still in high school.
Oh, yeah.
So, what we were talking about,
The first airplane.
yes, that airplane ride. Did you go up to the pilot?
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Tell me how you and what you felt.
Oh, exhilaration. I thought it was a blast. I really liked it. It was an open cockpit thing. And he landed in a field that belonged to my future father-in-law then. And he landed in that field, and because he was using my father-in-law's land, he owed somebody a ride, so he gave it to me. Nobody else wanted to ride with him.
Is that right? Well, that proved to be an exciting time, didn't it?
It really was.
Did it have anything to do with what you were looking forward to?
Well, a little bit, but there was another thing. One of my best friends was Harold Allen, and his dad was a pilot, and he had an old airplane in his barn that Harold and I refurbished and flew it without any instruction or anything.
How old were you then?
I was in high school. I was probably 16.
And you didn't kill yourself?
No. We got it down safely, and we flew it at least 3 times a week until his dad got home and found out what we were doing.
What kind of an airplane was it?
It was a Waco.
I remember the name.
Yeah.
What kind? Can you describe it?
Open cockpit, 2-seaters, fore and aft, and fabric wing, fabric everything. Good airplane though.
I'll bet it is.
Very forgiving to
Yeah.
let 2 kids fly it as much as we did.
Then you were thinking about going to college.
Yeah.
Did your father have the money to help you?
I never did ask him. I did it all on my own.
And what college did you choose?
I went to Seattle Pacific, which is a great school.
It is. My son went there for 2 years.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Great.
He liked it very much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good school.
And where was Seattle Pacific? In Seattle then?
No, my parents stayed in Sheridan, Oregon, where my dad's work was. And
No.
I went up to Seattle. And,
That's where the campus is
yes,
now.
yeah.
Surely. And
It
what
was
did
the same place.
what did you major in?
I majored in communications. There was a lady there who was she was a real character, but she was a very good debate instructor, and I was a champion debater in high school, and I wanted to do the same thing in college, and so I went up there and met a fellow that was a paraplegic. And he became my best friend. I carried him through college on my back. And we did, he used to brag that we could do anything any strong man could do.
What was his name, sir?
His name was Jack Arnold.
Is he still living?
No, he passed away. He was a couple years older than I am. I'm 88, so he would have been 90 if he's still alive.
Hmm.
With his disability, he
Yeah.
did well to lived as long as he did.
I suspect, yeah.
His wife is still living.
And do you contact her every now and then?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't it?
She's in Seattle.
Isn't that nice? What were you doing on the December the 7th, 1941? You remember that day?
Oh, sure. What American couldn't remember it? I was singing in a quartet in a school in Michigan, and we were on our way to a service where we were going to sing. Listening to the car radio, we heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor.
And what were your thoughts?
I was going to get in it. So the next day was Monday, and my best buddy and I, who just died recently in an airplane accident, he was flying. But Sheldon Arnett and I went to recruiting station in the nearest town that had one, which was Albion, Michigan. And a fatherly recruiting officer said, "You're just about at the end of your term, aren't you?" We said, "Yes." And he said, "You'll do your country and yourself a favor to stay there and finish the semester, and then you'll have lots of time to get in the service." So it was good advice, and we took that advice.
Were your companions in the quartet all students at Seattle Pacific?
No, I was at Spring Arbor College at that time in Michigan.
Oh, how did you get there?
Uh,
Why did you get there?
well, a couple of my cousins were going there, and I was the only one that had a car that could make it all the way from Oregon to Michigan. It was a Model A, and so we all piled in my car and drove back to Michigan, and we were there when the war started.
What did you sing in the quartet? What part did you sing?
I sang baritone. Switched off with bass sometimes, but we had a good bass singer. So
Well, that's good. So did you went back then to Michigan, to the school in Michigan? What college in Michigan was it?
Spring Arbor,
And that's located where?
in Spring Arbor.
That sounds appropriate.
Just a little ways from Albion, 8 miles from Albion.
I know there was a college in Albion,
I think there is.
that I recall. Yeah. So you finished the term, which was your second year, third year,
Yeah,
one of those.
my second year.
And you enlisted then?
Then we went home first. I had agreed to drive a car for an attorney friend of mine from Michigan to Oregon, which saved him a lot of money. And my buddy drove a pickup for his dad, so we switched leading all the way back to Oregon.
Were you living in Sheridan then?
My parents were still living in Sheridan.
So you enlisted in Sheridan.
No, there was no place to enlist in Sheridan. Sheridan's a little town of 1,500. So I went to Seattle and I enlisted.
And how was the Navy and the Marines so lucky to get future Major Cox?
Yeah, that's what I wonder.
No idea?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. The training and everything.
So you enlisted, and that, what year was that? 1942? Early?
Yes.
In 42.
Early in 42.
And when you went into the Marines or to the Navy?
Well, you have to go into the Navy first if you're going to be an officer. And so I went into the Navy, took my officer training and so forth.
Where?
Well, moved me around quite a bit. Started out in Livermore, California,
Mm-hmm.
and then they sent me to Corpus Christi, Texas. And then I was on several different bases that were part of the Corpus Christi Naval Air Station
So you were still in the Navy as a cadet?
as a cadet.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I,
Were you married at that time?
no,
You hadn't been married yet.
couldn't be married at that time. And so then when I was ready to graduate,
What, excuse me, this was basic training or basic officer training?
yeah,
That consisted of what? What were some of the courses you had to take?
well, we took military tactics, military formations. It was all military.
Probably military, naval regulations.
Oh yeah, naval regulations.
I remember that well. And some of the other things. What did you do down in Texas? In the airfield there?
Well, I flew.
Did you get in? Where did you get into your first plane and take your first training in the planes?
In
Corpus Christi?
no,
Livermore.
California,
Livermore.
Livermore.
Livermore. Yeah,
That's where you got your primary
primary training in Livermore.
training there. And how long did that last, sir?
I think only 3 months.
Mm-hmm. You soloed there.
Oh yeah,
In what aircraft?
Stearman.
The old
Good airplane.
Stearman.
I did a lot of things in it I wasn't supposed to do.
It too was forgiving.
Well, my instructor, every time I did one of them, thought I got away with it. When I got on the ground, he said, "I know that was you," and I looped the San Francisco Bridge, and
While you were at Livermore?
yeah,
Did
I
you-
landed on a moving train. I did a few unconventional things.
Were you flying solo then?
Oh yeah, well, you had to solo.
Yeah, but I mean when you landed on the train?
Yeah, I was flying solo. Nobody else would do it.
That's amazing. Well, that's quite courageous, and especially in those days.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. And you loved flying.
Oh yeah.
Did you ever think when did you first start thinking of a career change, really, basically, from perhaps going into the ministry or staying with the military and flying? When did that come
I didn't
about?
have to think about it.
It happened.
They grabbed me and
Yeah.
told me where I was going and put me through all the ropes at Corpus Christi. And when I graduated, I had the choice of remaining in the Navy. I'd been commissioned an ensign, or if the top 10% of the class could go directly into the Marine Corps. I was in the top 10%, so I got to go in the Marine Corps.
And you were second lieutenant then
Yeah,
in the Marine Corps, and you got your wings,
yes.
and that was exciting. Who pinned your wings on you?
Pardon?
Who pinned your wings?
The commander of the base there to Corpus Christi, and I can't even remember his name. I don't think I knew it at the time.
Yeah.
but he was a bird colonel. And
How many in your class? How many were in your class?
I think 42.
Any washouts?
Well, to begin with, I think there were 60.
Hmm.
And then 42 of us graduated. But we were pretty well thinned out by the time we got to Corpus Christi.
So where did they send you next?
They sent me to Florida to the Naval Air Navigation School because I fouled up on my navigation flight. And I landed at a Air Force base before I ran out of gas. And they wouldn't tell me where I was. But I went into their operations, and there was a map about the size of this wall with a pin right in that air base. So I found out where I was without asking anybody.
And where was it?
And it was in Texas.
Somewhere in Texas.
Someplace in Texas.
Did you gas up there? Did they give you gas?
Oh, yeah. They did finally. They made me think they weren't going to, but they gave me a really bad time.
And what did the skipper say when you got back?
I don't think the skipper ever found out about it. Some of my close friends found out about it. And the reason I went to Air Navigation School in Florida was that our final navigation flight at Corpus Christi, 4 of us went up in a SNB, Beechcraft twin, and you'd start out as an observer, then you'd be pilot, then co-pilot, then navigator, and rotated until you'd fulfilled all of those positions. By the time we'd done that, we were lost. We didn't know who it was that fouled up even. But so we had to hunt for Corpus Christi, and we finally found it because by radio means.
Beacon.
Got back about 2 hours late, but we made it. But because of that, they sent me to Air Navigation School in Florida.
For how long were you there?
We were there for 4 months. So that slowed down my progress toward my
Yes.
joining a squadron by quite a lot.
Did the other 3 partners, did they have to do the same thing?
Yeah,
Because everybody was lost.
right.
How fascinating.
That's where you got married, wasn't it?
What?
That's where you got married, in Florida.
Oh, yeah. And my mother met me down there with my
bride-to-be.
bride-to-be. And that's a story, too.
Tell us about it.
Yeah.
It's a long story.
We had to get on a bus and ride up to where was it in Florida? Do you remember?
Was it near
I don't
Tampa?
remember the name of the town, but my mom would ride with me up there and my bride to get a license so we could get married. And after 4 trips on a bus in the hot of Florida summer,
No
in
air
uniform,
no air conditioning.
no air conditioning. We finally got our license and were married.
What year? What was the date of that wedding? Do you remember? Put it this way: how old were you at the time?
22. I think it was July.
Was that Fort Lauderdale?
Yeah, Fort Lauderdale.
And then you were stationed. I know it's rather, you've been so many different places. I realized
Yeah.
that it's hard to remember, and I don't mean to get so fussy that we have to go through that, because that's not as important as some of the other things to follow. But just how did you continue in your
Military
how
career.
in your career? Yeah, how did you finally get to a squadron, and where?
Okay. I was stationed at Cherry Point,
Okay.
the largest Marine base in the world. And I was advised by a hot rod little major that the Marine Corps was going to get P-38s. So he said, stick with twin engine and you'll be in a P-38. It was blowing smoke. The Marine Corps did get P-38s, 2 of them. I didn't get to fly any one of them.
Oh, man.
But my closest friend, who was my cousin, he went into the Air Force and flew P-38s.
Right.
One mission, he was shot down and spent the rest of the war in prison camps.
Yeah. So you stuck with multi-engine then,
Yeah.
and took most of your training in, what planes did you fly?
The twin Cessna and the SNB.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sent me to Cherry Point, and they were making up squadron VMB 413 to send overseas, and I landed as a co-pilot in that squadron. And we were the first Marine Corps PBJ squadron in the war.
And where did you go? Where did you land? Where was your destination there?
Okay, we flew into Espiritu Santo
From where? You flew?
from San Diego.
Okay.
Well,
Here.
Hawaii.
Sure,
and
to jump. Hops.
Johnson Island. And I was with that squadron until the end.
Is that right? The entire time?
413, right?
And you were flying there B-25s?
Right.
I've got a picture of B-25 right over here. I don't, if you could see that for just a moment, I'm going to try and zero in on it. You want to point to that?
The 75 millimeter.
Yeah. And the cannon is where? The cannon?
The cannon is right there.
Mm-hmm.
And the bomb bay doors are open.
Mm-hmm.
We had 14 bomb racks there, so we could carry 14 100-pound bombs, or 4 500-pound bombs, or one 1,000-pound bomb.
How many in the crew?
Typically, we'd have from 5 to 7. 2 pilots, navigator, turret gunner, side turret gunners, and tail gunner.
And the officers were the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, and
That was it.
that was it. And you, when did you become chief pilot, first pilot?
While I was over there, I was co-pilot to the CO. And,
You were first lieutenant
yeah.
then?
And then after Galatian left, who was our CO, we got the next CO, I think, was Bertrand, and he had the shakes, and when he'd put his hands on the controls, I'd have to put my hand over his to hold him still, or would never have gotten off the ground. It was a terrible experience.
Really? Where did you fly from?
At that time, we were flying from Green Island to whatever the target area is.
And Green Island is located where, sir?
North of Guadalcanal, about 100 miles.
And they had an airstrip there.
Yeah.
And your destinations were generally islands?
A lot of islands, but we flew to Raval routinely at night. We lost a lot of our planes by bad weather, bad navigation.
Really?
We recovered a few of them. They landed in the ocean and made it into lifeboats, and the black cat guys picked them up, you know,
Yeah.
Catalinas.
How long were your missions?
Typically 4 hours, 2 hours up and 2 hours back.
And how much time did you spend? You tell us about the enemy planes.
The one that I feared the most was the Betty. It was a twin-engine,
bomber.
fast airplane. It was a fighter bomber, and it could outrun anything we had. But it was very vulnerable. One blast of short blast from a 50 caliber machine gun, and it was out of the air. No durability. Whereas the B-25 that we were flying could absorb a lot of lead.
What kind of armor did you have on board?
What kind of
Protection.
We had typically iron plate, 1/4 of an inch thick, behind each pilot and around most of the positions for personnel throughout the airplane, including the tail gunner.
And you moved from position from navigator, you started as a navigator and then worked your way to co-pilot?
No, navigator wasn't a pilot, so he didn't, he was at the top of his,
The top of the rung.
right.
And how many missions did you make?
How many missions? You know, I've tried to figure that out. I could figure it out from my logbook, but about 100 missions.
And your plane, was it ever hit?
It was hit plenty. One time the crew chief counted 117 perforations in the skin. Still flying.
Yeah.
That was a great thing about that B-25. It could take a lot of punishment and still be in the air. I
Yeah.
came back one time with this fin gone and this engine gone and over 100 perforations in the skin. Flew it home.
Did they have, were there any wounded on board that you had to use medical knowledge or anything to help?
Nobody ever got hurt in one of my airplanes.
Is that right? My goodness.
Good Lord was with us.
Yeah, somebody's looking down at you, for you. What was the most exciting time while flying? Was there any particular moment that you remember that you'd like to share?
Well, the most exciting moments were the strafing runs we made on heavy enemy positions, where we were right down on the ground and flew right into them and blew up ammunition dumps and fuel dumps.
And that was where the cannon came in handy.
Yeah. Although the first time I fired that cannon, it scared the life out of me. I thought it was going to shake the airplane apart.
Where was
The recoil on that
is it?
75 millimeter cannon? I thought it was going to stop us in the air and cause a stall. But it hung together.
Where was that?
That was on the island of Bougainville.
About what year? 44, 43?
43.
43. Is that where, did you run into much ACAC
Oh yeah,
over Rebel?
yeah.
Was that the most?
Yeah, that was the most because that was in totally enemy territory. We got a lot of ACAC there.
And you were usually flying there at higher altitude.
Well, we didn't use higher altitudes much, except in cooperation with Air Force operations, that kind of thing. That's the only time I ever got above 10,000 feet.
Is that right?
But most of our missions were ground level. Come back with
Pump.
and the Bombay doors would close on palm fronds.
Really?
Bring a few of them home.
What scared you the most?
You know, I can't say. Scared doesn't identify anything.
A Marine doesn't
We were
get scared.
excited.
A Marine doesn't get scared.
Yeah, right.
I know that. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
Your squadron had a nickname.
Pardon?
Your squadron had a nickname.
Oh, the Flying Nightmares.
And you must have had a nickname.
They called him Preacher Boy.
But I don't think I had a nickname.
No, they
But-
called you Preacher Boy or Preacher Bob.
Yeah, Preacher Bob.
Well, that was good. That was putting your two main interests together.
Yeah.
Did you, what kind of services did you have overseas?
We were an independent squadron. We didn't have, so we didn't have a chaplain or anything. So I performed chaplain duties.
For whoever wanted to come?
Yes, and then for whoever was killed, it was a memorial service and that
Was your attendance in your services?
Universal.
It was. It's amazing.
There are no atheists in foxholes, and there aren't in the air either.
Yes, I believe that's true. Well, that was very handy then. And were you a captain by that time?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they were mostly on Sundays?
Well, and then just before every mission, we would gather around the plane that was going out and have a prayer service. And everybody that was involved was there.
Even if it wasn't your airplane?
Right.
Amazing. That's great.
We had some good Christian boys on that in the squadron, like Jim Merriman.
Any of those fellas still living?
Jim Merriman is.
And what was his name?
What was his name?
What was his name? Jim?
Jim Merriman,
Where was he from?
Texas. We went to see him not very long ago
Where does he live now?
in Texas.
I suppose there are lots of talking there then.
Oh, yeah. And we have a squadron reunion every year, but they're beginning to peter out because
Sure.
guys are dying off pretty fast. And I'm 88, and I was one of the younger guys.
Yeah, that's true. That's why these interviews are so important, to get them firsthand. And we appreciate you reminiscing and talking with us, because you're certainly among friends.
Yeah.
And I want you to feel comfortable that any other things, how about any humorous things that maybe went on? More than one probably, but can you give me any?
You make it very easy.
How about humorous things when you were flying?
No.
Nothing really very funny that stands out in your mind. Well, let me ask you this, Major. When did you first come home? What kind of leaves did you have? Were you able to come home between 42 and when was the first time you came back home?
43.
So you did come
I
back in
lived there
43.
for a year
Yeah.
and didn't get to come back. They sent us to Australia for wrestling.
R&R. And then back to the squadron.
Back to the squadron.
How often did you get to go to Australia?
Twice.
Mm-hmm. And that was a place to recuperate and realize that.
And they rolled out the red carpet for us. I stayed with the Minister of Transportation for the nation of Australia.
Really?
And in his home, and was his guest.
Perfect.
And that was kind of typical.
Is that right? You were there for about 30 days?
Oh, 2 weeks.
Did most of the crew go together? Stay together?
No.
Or did you rotate on an
Because-
individual basis?
Well, the pilots rotated, and then the crewmen on an individual basis. But the pilots together.
And when did you finally get back to the USA?
44.
You've got a chest full of ribbons there, Major Cox. Can you describe them for me, please?
I can't even see them.
What are some of the commendations in the?
Well, there's a presidential commendation
Mhm.
there. Unit citation for VMB 413 and the work that we did.
At the
President Roosevelt issued that. There's a Navy Flying Cross and Air Ribbon. And, the Flying Cross has some stars on it.
can see that.
And that means multiple times.
Mhm.
And what else?
If you can think of a list to send to us,
Okay,
I think that would be, we'd love to include that.
all right.
How was the chow while you were there?
It varied a lot. Some things were hardly edible and other things were pretty good.
At the island where you were at, leaving from, was it a Navy base or a Marine base, or was it just an Allied military base?
Where we were the longest period of time was Sterling Island. And that was, there was a Air Force P-39 squadron there. There was an Australian squadron and our squadron. One runway. Started at the ocean and ended at the ocean on a peninsula. When we had a good load of bombs, you had to drop off the end until you picked up ground effect off of the ocean. Pretty exciting the first time.
Bet. And you came back to that island.
Yeah.
Was there any competition between the services?
I don't think so. I never did sense any. There was a lot of cooperation, but we cooperated with the Air Force a lot. And, they were glad to have us, and we were glad to have them.
Yeah. That's super. When you got back to the States, were you able to fly after you got back?
Oh, sure.
Where was that, and
Well-
what aircraft?
We went back to Cherry Point again, which is home for the Marine Corps. And if we hadn't dropped the big bomb, I'd have been back over there again.
Yeah.
Because I was just getting ready to leave again with a different squadron when that happened. And they gave us our choice of sticking with them for 3 months or getting out immediately. And my in-laws were there, had driven out from Oregon to North Carolina. And so we got out right away and drove in tandem back to Oregon.
What did you do when you got back to Oregon?
Went back to school,
Did you?
Seattle Pacific.
Did you stay in the Marine Reserve?
Yes.
And you were what rank at that time?
Captain.
Captain. So you went back to Seattle, and you went back to Seattle Pacific, and you majored in what? What was your major?
My major was communications.
Spent several years there?
Well, I went to the University of Washington from there and for my graduate work. And,
Did your was your wife with you there then as well?
yes.
And did she go to work?
No.
Did you have any children then?
Yes, my oldest daughter was born while I was overseas.
What's her name, sir? What is her name?
Barbara Joanne. She's a pastor's wife in Oregon now.
And whom did she marry?
She married the only All-American we had on our basketball team at at Los Angeles Pacific. And
What's his name?
Keith Stroop. And he's from South Dakota,
Iowa.
Iowa.
And you had more children when you were at the university.
No, Bill was born,
He was born in South Carolina or someplace over there.
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
Now, your son-in-law is I'm going to have to change.
Now he has 11 kids, so I don't know if
11
you want,
kids?
I don't want if you want to start asking
Did
him
you
about kids.
Yeah, well, we won't get too fussy about that then. Are you tired?
No,
Willing to go ahead?
sure.
How about Mrs.?
Oh, I'm fine. Take another sip of water, Bob.
Yeah.
I've been sipping it every little bit.
Be warm in here. I get hoarse after a while.
Yeah, so does Bob.
I'm gonna make sure that we're recording here.
I like your haircut.
Thank you, sir. I keep it short in case they call me back in. Always be ready, always prepared. Now you came back to Seattle Pacific as a student in communication. Your wife was living there, and you said you had a daughter born there. And how many children did you have, may I ask?
Altogether, I have 11.
11 children. With the same wife?
No, the last three
Okay.
were with her.
Okay. We'll get to that later, but you have 11 children all and can you name them
Sure, I can name them.
in order of?
Barbara, Bill, Tom, Jim, Christy, Ann, Kenny, Tori. That's 8. Who did I leave out?
I think you got them all.
I don't know. I'm not sure. It's close.
Well, I just didn't get the 3 that are with her.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah. What about those?
Oh, well, that's Katie and Debbie and John.
Okay, we'll talk about them a little bit later, remind me. So you really had a family.
Yep.
That was a big family and a strong family. And you graduated from Seattle Pacific.
Yeah, I took my graduate work at the University of Washington, and then,
And what was that in? Was that a degree?
yes, in communications. Then I went to Medford, Oregon as pastor for 2 years. And then I was called to Los Angeles Pacific as president for
Let me ask you, what church were you in Medford?
the Free Methodist Church.
What, did it have a name, or it was the only one there?
Medford Free Methodist Church.
Okay. And you pastored there for
2 years.
2 years.
And then I was called to Los Angeles Pacific College, where I was president for 13 years.
Can you give me a little background on the Los Angeles Pacific College? How did it start? Where was it?
It was in Los Angeles. It started as a seminary.
In Los Angeles?
Yes. And then became a junior college. And then when I went there, it had 4 years of Bible and then 2 years of everything else. And it was hard, tough go. So I talked the church into letting me build a 4-year program, and I got it fully accredited.
Hmm.
And good school.
And all the time you were maintaining your membership in the U.S. Marine Corps Reserve,
Right.
going to meetings.
I didn't go to meetings very often. I went to camp once a year.
You were going to meetings when I was dating you.
Yeah, I guess I was.
And you went to camp. What camps did you go to, may I ask?
Camp Pendleton.
Camp Pendleton. What years were you don't remember the years?
When did we get married?
I was there in 56 to 58.
We could well have crossed
We
paths.
well could have. I was with the 5th Marines for 18 months, and then Mainside for 6 months before I got out.
Oh,
Enjoyed it very much. Good service.
yeah.
I'm interested again in the school, Pacific, at Los Angeles
Los Angeles Pacific College.
Pacific College, and you were president there for 2 years. No, you were president for more than that.
Yeah, I was president there for 13 years.
And that campus is located where, or was?
At that time, it was in Los Angeles, the Highland Park area. We had a very limited campus, so we merged with Azusa College, which wasn't accredited, so we accredited them by the merger and moved on to their huge campus out in Azusa, where it still is.
Do you remember the year that was about?
1965.
65, yeah.
And you were there for 13 years. Amazing. The school grew.
Yep.
What is the school known for, by and large? What's the more?
It has a strong sports program. We're commemorating the coach. We only had one coach for everything because we weren't big enough for anything else. But we excelled in football and basketball and track.
And you enjoyed that.
Oh yeah, very much.
I can remember going to concerts with the Azusa Choir and chorus
Oh,
or whatever
yeah.
it was, very often.
Yeah.
They were excellent quality students, and the music was exceptional.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I have a granddaughter that just came down to apply to check into that program
Oh,
about
great.
4 months ago. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Wonderful.
So, and she lives in Northern California. But when did you meet Glennis? When and where did you meet your wife now?
When I was at the college,
In Azusa?
it was Los Angeles Pacific at
Then.
that time.
Was she a student there then?
I didn't understand your guess.
Was she a student
Oh, no.
there? No. She was working there?
She was working as a
Where did,
secretary to an attorney friend of mine.
and how did you meet?
She was taking flying lessons, and they were just booting her around. Didn't you change instructor several times?
3 times.
So this friend of mine for whom she worked, and I went to college with, he said, well, why don't you take Glennis and get her soloed? So I did. And I've been taking instruction from her ever since.
And that's a pleasure, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
she's a great gal.
they are. They're tremendous. And you had 3 children with her.
Yes.
And their names again are,
Katie and Debbie and John.
and what do they do? And where are they located?
John is in Clovis. He's in commercial real estate, doing very well. And Katie lives right across the street from us. And her husband is he's a minister, and he does a lot of other things. I don't know what all. And then Debbie's husband is a
Mortgage banker.
mortgage banker.
And she lives where?
She lives in
Pismo.
Pismo Beach.
Oh, beautiful.
And she's a professional harpist. And Katie is a singer.
Really talented ladies. Excellent. How many grandchildren do you have? I won't ask you to name them.
35, I think.
Great-grandchildren?
At least a dozen.
7?
Dozen.
A dozen?
Mhm.
Don't ask me to name them.
That's a job, isn't it, sir?
His first wife died of cancer.
Why don't you come on over and join him over there, if you don't mind?
Oh dear, I didn't.
I'm going to see if I can maneuver this around. That's much better. Okay, and this is Glennis Cox, Mrs. Cox. And tell me about where you met, how you met.
Well, we met in my boss's office. He stopped by one day to see my boss, and that's when my boss said, "Why don't you take Glennis flying?" And I was so embarrassed. So we met out at a little airport a couple days later, and a couple days after that he soloed me. And the funny thing about that whole thing was, once he came in his Marine Corps uniform, and it was brown or kind of greenish brown.
It was green.
Green. And I said to him, I didn't know you were a Boy Scout leader.
Say that to a Marine officer.
But my parents did not allow me to date military men, so I didn't know what they look like.
I love it. What year was that you met?
We met in 1964, and that's when we were married in '64. And what I started to say earlier, don't forget, he had 8 children by his first wife, and then she died of cancer in 1961, I believe it was.
So you have been married now how long?
We've been married 65, and today is 2010, so is that 45 years?
35, 45 years.
45 years.
Amazing. Wow. Wonderful.
So we're
So-
shooting for 50.
So you're used to him.
I'm used to him.
And where do you folks live now?
Atascadero.
Atascadero, which is near San Luis Obispo.
And what avenue, what's a home address?
And we're on Ardilla Avenue.
And how did you get up to the Atascadero?
We lived in the San Joaquin Valley, and it was always our plan to move to the coast when we retired. And I had to take early retirement in 2002. So we head for the coast, and we couldn't afford to buy any of the houses on the coast, so we had to come in about 15 miles.
Which was a godsend.
Yes, we love it there.
Beautiful.
And then 2 of our daughters came and moved over, and we never expected that.
That makes it so nice.
So now we have 7 grandchildren near us.
Beautiful. So when did you retire then from the Reserve, Marine Corps Reserve? 1960?
1964.
64, yeah.
He quit without telling me. I wouldn't have let him quit. But life became overwhelming to him,
Sure.
and we weren't married yet. He just didn't think he could carry on with everything plus
Yeah.
the meetings.
And you had a large family.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. What do you folks do for recreation?
Grandkids.
We have a very busy schedule, mostly seeing doctors.
Yes.
But we run to the store, but we just buy 2 or 3 things. We don't buy lots of food, and we don't stock up for a month. We just go day to day, kind of.
She's a very good cook.
We're just concentrating on keeping him well, and he's been dizzy for the past couple of weeks. We're hoping he'll get over that soon,
Sure.
because the doctor wants him to start walking 40 minutes a day.
Okay.
So that's our goal.
Doesn't the doctor understand he's a flyer? Not used.
Yeah, I think he does.
Well, and where do you go to services for religious services now?
We belong to
ABC.
Atascadero Bible Church,
Okay.
and
In Atascadero.
in Atascadero.
And are you have any positions in the church?
No. He pastored up until he retired in '02. He has really retired.
He's entitled to that.
He would love to. He always wanted to pastor until he died, but he has really slowed down.
Sure. Understandable.
So I'm hoping to get him perfectly well again. I don't know if that's possible, but we're growing an organic garden. We're doing everything we can to get well.
Sure. What have you been to the Air Museum here in Palm Springs before?
No.
This is your first time. Well, we hope you get a chance to either see a little bit more of it
We will.
Yeah.
this afternoon, or to be certainly welcome to come back. For just a moment, I'd like to, excuse me, ask you, sir, if I may, if you had a chance to talk to young people that are growing up today, like your own children, grandchildren, and so forth, what would you advise them? What advice would you give to them? Number one. And number two, what advice would you give to somebody who's planning or thinking in terms of going into the military for a career?
Young people should get an education up to their level of achievement. So many of them stop short of that, and they'll regret it for the rest of their lives.
What about a career in the military? Some young man.
Well,
You have some grandchildren
yes.
who are in.
We have a grandson who just graduated from West Point a couple weeks ago, and he was over
Terrific.
the other day, and he asked you for advice, and what did you tell him? I forgot.
Well, my advice to him was stick with it and make as much as he can out of his military career, because he's got quite a commitment.
Absolutely.
And you know, he could come out as a lieutenant colonel, as
Sure. Absolutely.
my brother did, or
I remember your advice now.
oh,
Respect the men under you.
oh yeah, and above all, take care of your men. Respect them, honor them, trust them.
That's a beautiful, beautiful thought. I want to thank you, Major Cox, for coming into the city, out here to Palm Springs this afternoon to give us share some of your experiences, and I appreciate you being here, and Mrs. and Glennis as well. Thank you again for your service.